Let's move to politics. Next question comes from Frank Hangozada.
Prime Minister, we have recently witnessed factional divisions and infighting within the government, the most ferocious character assassination of a senior minister, serious allegations against 2 MPs, mudslinging and tit-for-tat behaviour by both sides of Parliament. My question is, have the political parties become more focused on self-preservation than serving the electorate?
Well, thank you for that question, and I think that there has been a shrillness, if you like, to a lot of the current domestic political debate that puts people off. And if people are put off politics, then I think that's a dreadful thing. I want, the nation to feel a sense of engagement and connection with our democracy. Ultimately, who they vote for is a question for them, but you want people to be able to look at, the parliament, at political parties, and see the big issues being wrestled with. I think it's unfortunate that there's been this sort of real climate of fear about a big change, that is carbon pricing. There's been, a lot of fear abroad, but people will ultimately get to judge for themselves, and that, I think, is the true democratic test, that people can touch and feel something and work out what they think about it. In terms of, the dialogue in our country, I think it is better if we're bringing people together for serious discussions about important things. So, for example, on Wednesday this week, I'll be in Brisbane. We'll be bringing together business leaders and trade union leaders and civil society leaders, some of the state premiers, to talk about our economic future, knowing that we've, got a strong economy, and there'd be plenty of countries around the world who'd do anything to trade with our position. But we've got to keep every day strengthening and building for the next stage, and that's the kind of positive conversation I want to have coming out of Wednesday this week.
But why don't people feel encouraged by exactly what you said? There's a lot of noise within Parliament, there is a lot of arguing and toing and froing, that people are losing faith in what government is all about.
Look, I think there's that old kind of saying about, what's the noise and what's the signal. I think there is plenty of noise. What's important is the signal about what government is trying to achieve and what's important for the nation now. I think what's important for the nation now is to congratulate ourselves on a big shared achievement, and that is the current strength of our economy. We did it together during difficult days, and everybody played their part. And if I can just give you one statistic, because I think it tells the story, since the days of the global financial crisis to now, our economy is 10.3% bigger. In the Eurozone, they've gone backwards by 1.7%. In places like Spain, 1 in 4 people are unemployed, almost 25% of people. Here we've got an unemployment rate around about 5%. These are shared achievements. We built them together. But there are still some stresses and strains in parts of our economy, and still so many things we've got to do to realise our promise as a fair nation. That's what I think the political conversation should be about. I think there's been a lot of noise, a lot of fear about carbon pricing, and I think that will die away after the 1st of July. Not instantaneously, not overnight, but people will get to judge for themselves and see that a lot of this noise was just that.
The questioner also asked about the serious allegations against 2 MPs. Why did it take so long to come to the conclusion that Craig Thomson should be suspended and moved to the crossbenches?
Well, we're obviously, as leader, I was weighing up some issues here. I mean, we have the presumption of innocence, and, that's a principle we want to stand behind. There are proper processes that will weigh for Craig Thomson all of these issues. But I did, make a judgment call about respect for the Parliament. Some people agree with it, some people don't. That's life, but Craig Thomson has moved to the crossbench, and the proper processes instigated through Fair Work Australia and the like.
But very specifically, when you made the decision on April the 29th, this was a long time after the allegations were made, and there was a tremendous amount of controversy before that, you said a line had been crossed. I believe a line has been crossed here because a line has been crossed. I've acted. What was the line?
Well, there's someone's phone. It was an accumulation. Clearly there was the matter involving Mr Thompson and the questions involving Mr Slipper, and given that, I thought some steps needed to be taken. And
so what the line was the combination of having two problems?
It was a combination, yes, and I took a view about respect for the Parliament and the best way of securing that in what were a difficult set of issues. Both individuals strenuously deny the allegations against them, and they're entitled to their day in court.
So two was too many?
Well, look, it's not a metric. I said on the day it's not a sort of chemical formula where you work out molecules. It's not that kind of precision. It was a judgment call, and I made it.
All right, we've just got one more hand up here, and then we'll move on to some policy questions down the front.
Prime Minister, you talk about the 10.3% growth in the economy and it being a shared achievement. I think most Australians would agree it's probably fair to say that a large part of that shared agreement has come from mining and resources under the guidance and stewardship of people like Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer, who have been famously massive targets for your government. With that 10.3% growth that has been driven heavily by them, do you not think that rather than be a target you could, say thank you or give them a little bit of credit, because that wealth has had to be grown, and I think certainly there would be something that your government would want to thank them for rather than making them a constant target?
Well, I'm very happy to talk about Gina and Clive, and I'll address those issues, but I do want to say the shared achievement I'm talking about is pulling through the global financial crisis, and that required government to play its part. We guaranteed banks, we provided stimulus payments, but right around the nation, in factories, in shops, employers and employees came together. They worked out short-time working arrangements rather than, sacking you and sacking you and sacking you, keeping the workforce together and maybe everybody working a day less. Big workplaces like Holden came up with cooperative arrangements to keep their workers all there, and they pulled through. That is a shared achievement, and every one of us should be proud of that. That is something we did together. And yes, the strength of mining has been a terrific attribute of our economy, built by some big mining companies and some big players, built too by thousands of people who go and work very hard in those mines each day. On, Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer, they got involved in a political debate. They chose to do it. Got involved in a political debate about how much tax they should pay, where I was saying, the government was saying, and we continue to say, that at this time in our nation's development, given the huge profitability of mining and the fact that the strong Australian dollar is putting pressure on some industries, it's the right time to share a bit more from mining with other people around the nation, businesses around the nation, families around the nation. They said they didn't want to pay any more tax. They entered a political conversation. In a political conversation, there's going to be, politics going both ways, and there has been.
Very briefly, the banks have also been very profitable, as I'm sure everyone in this audience has contributed to the bank's profit in the last year in some way or another. Would you mind calling on the banks to share some of their, what could be considered super profits opinions?
Let me assure you, you would probably know after the interest rate reductions, and we have seen interest rates coming down. No. Interest rate reductions you shouldn't see as sharing, because the Reserve Bank makes the decision about interest rates. But when interest rates come down, you would have heard me and the Treasurer in particular prepared to offer very clear and free character assessments of bankers who weren't going to pass through all of that interest rate reduction to their customers. So let me assure you, we're prepared to say to the banking sector, which we guaranteed during the days of the global financial crisis. You mentioned
character assessments. Is something wrong with their characters if they don't pass it on? Or is it about their profitability and where they get the money from?
It's the right thing to do when it is not necessary for them, for cost of funds reasons, to hold these interest rate reductions back. It's the right thing to do to pass them on, and we're prepared to say that very clearly. And if Banker A doesn't give you the right deal, we've made it easier than it's ever been before to take your business down the street to Banker B.
All right, we've got another question on mining. It comes from Claudia Diaz.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, Prime Minister. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
That's okay.
You vow that no foreign worker will take a job that an Australian could do after Chris Bowen approved the hire of 1,700 foreign labourers. Most Anglo-Saxon Australians don't want to go to the remote areas. Why don't developers use the immigrant workers already in Australia waiting for an opportunity to work? They cannot find a job because of lack of Australian experience, and they're working as taxi drivers, cleaners, or factory workers. Is your government doing enough to integrate them?
Well, thank you for your question. I would hope that, I don't know if you've had a particular experience, but I would hope that people would say about this country that we do a good job as a nation. So I'm not really talking about the government here, I'm talking about all of us. We do a good job as a nation welcoming people to be part of our country in a different time and a different age. I was one of those migrants, a 4-year-old girl getting off a boat with her mum and dad who were 10-pound poms, as the parlance then was. And, you know, we certainly got to make a life here. We got to make a wonderful life here. We didn't have the, you know, problems that can come from not being from an English-speaking background. We had an easier journey, obviously, being English-speaking migrants. And I'm always just blown away by the courage of people who move around the world, not even speaking the language. But I think we're a good country for reaching out and bringing people into our Australian society.
What about working out a plan to get them into mining jobs, since there are apparently huge skill shortages and you've got all this pool of Australian-based labour that are looking for jobs?
Very happy to talk about that, because whether it's people who have recently migrated here, or whether it's, you know, people who have been born here and been here all of their lives, I think there are lots of people who do want those jobs in mining towns and mining communities, and we've got to get the linkages right so people get those opportunities. That's one of the things we've created this jobs board for, because I hear stories all the time about people in, you know, country New South Wales. They've got trade qualifications, they've gone on, you know, seek.com or one of those sites, they've put their CVs into mining companies and they haven't heard back. We've got to do better than that, and you're asking us to go even a step further and to help people to get the training to get those jobs. And we have just financed, and we're putting in place a huge new skills and training package which we hope will help people get skills for employment and skills for those jobs. I think we're on the same page. I think you're absolutely right.
Just a quick follow-up. Is it true that you told a meeting of union leaders you were furious about the foreign workers' decision?
Well, I actually answered a number of those questions in Parliament, Tony, and I'm not going to talk about, you know, discussions I have in my office with individuals, but I can tell you I'm very passionate about making sure Australians get these opportunities first.
You'd be happy to deny that if it weren't true, though, weren't you? Well, I mean, you're either furious about the decision or you're not furious about the decision. What would you tell this audience?
Well, what I tell this audience is I can get furious about circumstances where I'm in Western Australia and I'm meeting with mining industry executives, and they've got huge projects in the north, and they're saying to me, we can't get skilled labour. And then I can drive out of Perth to Kwinana and go to places where apprentices are being put off. I get furious about that. And absolutely.
So were you then equally furious about the decision?
Well, I'm explaining to you my motivations, Tony.
Yeah.
I want those kids to get that chance, and that's how we've got to structure our arrangements. What's less recognised about this, you know, it became the subject of public debate, the Roy Hill Agreement, is 6,700 Australians will get an opportunity to work in that project. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. But as we build these super projects around the country, I want to make sure that we're getting, you know, the training right, the opportunities right, so I don't hear stories about an apprentice losing his job and his opportunity in life whilst a mining executive sitting at a table with me saying, I can't get the skilled workers I need.
And in the meantime,